February 2003, a man living in suburban France received a strange phone call. The number looked familiar, so he answered. But instead of hearing a voice, there was only static. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Then, he heard muffled voices in the background. Two women. And as he turned on the speakerphone and listened more carefully, one sentence made his blood run cold. "We need an alibi." The women sounded nervous, panicked. And worst of all, they appeared to be discussing a murder. At that moment, he had no idea the conversation was connected to one of the most disturbing family murder investigations France had seen in years. Tonight, we're covering the shocking true story of Monique Lejeune. A case filled with family tension, hidden resentment, and a clue that changed the entire investigation. This is A House Divided. Monique Lejeune was 52 years old and lived in a quiet neighborhood in Colomiers, France. To neighbors, she appeared to live a normal suburban life. She was married to her husband Claude, and together they had adult sons. The Lejeune family home was calm from the outside. But behind closed doors, there were growing tensions. Friends and relatives later told investigators that Monique often clashed with members of Claude's extended family. Arguments had become increasingly common, and one particular family member had a reputation for having a short temper. Still, nobody imagined those conflicts would ever lead to violence. On February 7, 2003, Monique's husband and two sons prepared for an overnight family gathering near Paris. The trip was supposed to be a celebration, but Monique chose to stay home, partly because someone needed to look after the family dogs, but also because she didn't want to attend another tense family event. At around 3 p.m., the men left the house. Monique was now alone. At least, that's what investigators initially believed. Later that evening, one of Monique's sons, Jean-Luc, stopped by to visit. The visit appeared normal. The two talked for a while. Monique even gave her son a haircut. Around 7 p.m., Jean-Luc left on his bicycle and headed home. But shortly after he left, there was another knock at the door. And according to investigators, that knock would change everything. The next morning, Monique's neighbor woke up exhausted. Throughout the night, dogs in the neighborhood had been barking non-stop. Annoyed and tired, she walked to her window and opened the blinds. That's when she noticed something unusual. There was a dark shape lying on the walkway outside Monique's front door. At first, she couldn't tell what it was, so she leaned closer to the glass. And suddenly, she realized she was looking at a body. Monique Lejeune had been found lying motionless outside her own home. The neighbor immediately called police. Within hours, investigators arrived at the scene. The case quickly became a homicide investigation. French police captain Anne Priem led the inquiry. When detectives examined the area, they realized Monique had fought desperately to survive. Signs of a violent struggle could be seen near the doorway. Investigators believed the attack had likely started inside the entrance of the home before spilling outside. But one detail immediately confused police. Nothing appeared stolen. There were no signs of forced entry. And Monique seemed to have opened the door willingly. That meant there was a strong possibility she knew her killer. Soon after, Monique's husband and sons returned home from their trip. They were devastated when officers informed them what had happened. But during the interviews, investigators learned something important. Jean-Luc had visited his mother shortly before the murder. That suddenly made him one of the last known people to see Monique alive. And detectives needed answers. Police brought Jean-Luc in for questioning. Investigators asked him to describe everything that happened during his visit. Jean-Luc cooperated. He explained that he had spent time talking with his mother before leaving for dinner. He denied harming her. And at first, detectives weren't sure whether to believe him. Meanwhile, police began interviewing neighbors and extended family members. That's when another name started coming up repeatedly: Henry, a relative who reportedly had a tense relationship with Monique. Witnesses described arguments between them in the past. Some even claimed the hostility had become personal. Detectives visited Henry's home. During questioning, investigators noticed something strange. When told about Monique's death, Henry reportedly smiled. That immediately raised suspicion. But despite the unusual reaction, detectives couldn't find physical evidence linking him to the crime. His home showed no obvious signs of violence, and his wife claimed he had been home during the night of the murder. The investigation stalled. For weeks, detectives struggled to determine what really happened. Then everything changed because of a phone call. A man contacted police and reported something extremely disturbing. He said he had recently received an accidental call from someone he knew. At first, he ignored it. But after listening closely, he realized he could hear two women speaking in the background. And according to the witness, the women appeared to be discussing a murder. Even more chilling, one of them mentioned needing an alibi. Police traced the call, and investigators discovered it was connected to someone inside Monique's extended family circle. Suddenly, the case exploded in a completely new direction. As detectives revisited the evidence, forensic teams continued analyzing DNA collected from the crime scene. One sample became especially important: DNA found underneath Monique's fingernails. Investigators believed the sample likely belonged to the killer, because during the attack, Monique had clearly fought back. Weeks later, the laboratory finally returned the results. And according to investigators, the findings changed the entire case. The DNA pointed toward a female suspect. That revelation shocked detectives. Until then, most attention had focused on male family members. But now, investigators believed a woman had been directly involved in the killing. Police returned to the family circle and began questioning relatives again. Eventually, pressure mounted. Conflicting stories began appearing, and investigators became convinced multiple people knew more than they were admitting. According to police, the murder may have started as a heated argument at Monique's front door. Investigators believed emotions escalated rapidly. At some point, the confrontation turned violent. Monique fought back fiercely, leaving behind critical forensic evidence. That evidence would ultimately help unravel the truth. Based on the investigation, police believe the killer arrived at Monique's home during the evening hours. The two began arguing near the front entrance. What started as a verbal confrontation quickly spiraled out of control. Investigators later concluded the attack was fueled by anger, resentment, and long-standing family conflict. After the assault, the killer fled the scene. But Monique managed to make it outside before collapsing near the walkway. Throughout the night, the family dogs barked continuously. Yet nobody realized the horrifying reason why. As detectives tightened the investigation, inconsistencies in witness statements became harder to ignore. Eventually, investigators uncovered enough evidence to identify those responsible. The accidental phone call, the forensic evidence, and the growing contradictions all pointed in the same direction. This was not a random attack. Police believed it was a deeply personal crime, connected to family tensions that had been building for years. And in the end, the very people Monique knew and trusted became central figures in the investigation. Cases like this are often the hardest for investigators to solve, because when violence comes from inside a family, the truth becomes buried beneath loyalty, fear, and silence. At first, Monique Lejeune's murder appeared to be a mystery with almost no clues. But one accidental phone call changed everything. A random mistake exposed hidden conversations and pushed investigators toward the truth. To this day, the case remains remembered as one of France's most shocking family murder investigations. Not because of a robbery, not because of a stranger, but because the danger was allegedly much closer to home. And sometimes, the most terrifying crimes happen inside families that already appear broken. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more true crime stories every week. And let me know in the comments, do you think investigators would have solved this case without that accidental phone call? Thanks for watching.